If you want to learn how to aim any shot with side spin, then definitely watch this video till the end. Let's play the shot first with actually no spin on the cue ball, and we're trying to make the 9 ball into this pocket here. As you can see, this is our ghost ball on the table. This means the ghost ball here and the 9 ball are in a straight line to the heart of the pocket, and if I'm just shooting to the center of the ghost ball, I will be able to make that 9 ball. You can also see this tiny figure here on the table or on the rail. I've actually put that onto that rail to see when I'm down on the shot where exactly I need to aim. So no spin and a soft hit. And what happened here? We missed this shot. Did we do something wrong? Did we aim wrong? No. The problem that we're facing here is when we're hitting soft, we have something called cut-induced throw. You have to imagine that the cue ball is actually coming from that direction. So when the cue ball makes contact with the 9 ball, it also pushes the 9 ball a tiny bit into that direction. And because of that, we're actually missing this ball fat. Let's do the same thing and play this shot a lot harder this time and aim to the exact same point to the center of the ghost ball, and let's see what happens here. So again, center of the ghost ball, but this time we're hitting a lot harder. And you can see this time we made the ball. Well, the difference is when you're aiming or playing shots and you're hitting hard, there isn't a lot of cut-induced throw. If you're hitting a bit softer, or the softer you hit, the more throw you have. And this is why when you're playing this shot with no spin and you want to aim to the ghost ball point, then you have to hit a lot harder. And if you hit soft with no spin on the cue ball, well, you will actually miss thick. But the problem is if we're hitting really hard, we lose a lot of accuracy. So what could we do instead? Well, if you watched some pro players play and if you're watching my videos, you probably noticed that on this type of shot, I always like to use a tiny bit of outside spin. And the exact reason for that is that I don't have to hit hard. I still have that cut-induced throw, but with that outside spin, I also have a bit of spin-induced throw. And the right spin throws the 9 ball to the left. So the 9 ball would go here with no spin. We use some right spin, and the right spin throws the 9 ball a tiny bit to the left. And this is why I'm using that outside spin, because I can still aim to my ghost ball point. I don't have to worry about cut-induced throw or spin-induced throw, because those two things are actually canceling each other out if I'm using a tiny bit of outside spin here. So let's show you how this would look. I'm still aiming to the ghost ball point, but this time just a tip of outside spin. And that way we are able to make that 9 ball. Alright, quick summary. Remember, the cue ball is coming from this direction. So if you're using no spin and you're hitting soft, the cue ball will actually catch the 9 ball, throw it a bit into this direction, and we will miss thick. What you can do is, if you still want to play it with no spin and hit it soft, just aim a bit thinner on the 9 ball. So actually aim it with the ghost ball aiming to the long rail, because then the cue ball again will catch the 9 ball and will actually throw it in the pocket. What you can also do is just use your regular ghost ball aiming point and just hit a lot harder, because that way the cut-induced throw won't be that present, or just be a tiny bit, and you will still be able to make the 9 ball. Or what you could also do is, if you don't want to hit it really hard, just use a touch of outside spin that actually throws the 9 ball to the left, and we also have the cut-induced throw that pushes the 9 ball to the right. Both of those factors are canceling each other out. You can still use the ghost ball aiming point and aim to the center of the pocket. If you're having a straight shot, there won't be any cut-induced throw, so no need for outside spin. If you just have a tiny bit of an angle, there will also be just a tiny bit of cut-induced throw. This means you will also just need to use a tiny bit of outside spin. It peaks around 30 degrees. This is where you have to use the most amount of outside spin. If you're a lot thinner, once again, then you have to use actually less outside spin. Okay, but this is a bit too deep into the topic. Let's play this shot once again. We're going to aim still to the center of the ghost ball. We're going to use the same amount of spin on the cue ball. The only difference here will be that we're hitting really hard. What do you think will happen? Will we make the 9 ball still into the pocket? Will we catch it a bit too thick? This means the 9 ball goes to the short rail. Or will we actually hit it a bit too thin? This means the 9 goes to the long rail. Think about it. What do you think will happen? You can also pause the video and I'm going to execute it, and we're going to talk about it afterwards. So Same amount of spin, same aiming point, but really, really hard. You can see what happened here is we actually hit the 9-ball into the short rail. And the reason for that is something called deflection. We didn't talk about deflection yet in this video, but what deflection basically means is, let me demonstrate real quick. When we're down in the shot and we're aiming to our ghost ball point, you can see the yellow figure on the rail, we will actually hit there. But if we're adding right spin to the cue ball, just as we did, and we're hitting hard, the cue ball will actually deflect to the left. So have a look where the cue ball hits that rail. You can see the cue ball actually hit the rail on the left of the figure, and this is exactly what happened here in our example. We were aiming to our ghost ball, but the cue ball actually deflected to the left because we were hitting it on the right, and you can see that way the cue ball goes to the left. So what happened was we were aiming to that ghost ball point, but the cue ball actually deflected to the left and we caught it too thick. And this is something really interesting. If you're hitting really hard, the deflection will always be the dominant force, because as you can remember in our first example, when we were hitting with no spin really hard, there was actually no cut-induced throw. And this happens when you're hitting really hard, there is no cut-induced throw or just a little bit, and no spin-induced throw. So whenever you're hitting really hard, you actually just have or mainly have to adjust for the deflection. So if I would play this shot with outside spin and I would hit really hard, I would actually not aim to the ghost ball point, but a bit to the right, so that they actually cut the 9-ball too thin, because then the deflection pushes the cue ball back on the line to the left. So let me show you how this would look. So it looks like I'm actually missing that 9-ball, but the deflection will push the cue ball to the left. And you can see how far we were actually off with our aiming, and this is really interesting. This is why it's so difficult to actually aim shots with spin if you're hitting really hard. Alright, let's summarize it again. If you're shooting soft and you're just using the right amount of outside spin, the cut-induced throw and the spin-induced throw will actually cancel each other out, and you can just aim to the center of the ghost ball. If you're having a bit too much spin on the cue ball, this means the spin-induced throw will be more dominant than the cut-induced throw. The 9-ball will be actually thrown to the left, remember, because you're using right spin. So in that case, you actually have to aim not to the ghost ball, but a bit thicker to the short rail, because then the 9-ball is be thrown to the left and goes to the center of the pocket. What happens, remember, if you're using outside spin and you're hitting really hard, remember deflection will be the dominant force. So let's actually pretend we're shooting from here and we're hitting really hard. This means the cue ball will actually deflect to the left. Even though you're aiming perfectly to the center of the ghost ball, the cue ball will actually arrive like this. So in this case, you actually won't make the 9-ball. So in our example, if the cue ball is coming from that direction and you're hitting really hard and you're aiming to the center of the ghost ball, the cue ball won't actually arrive here, but a bit more here, and this means you will actually shoot the 9-ball into the short rail. So with outside spin and a really hard hit on this particular shot, you actually have to aim a bit thinner. So not to the center of the ghost ball, but a bit more to this direction. Then the cue ball will deflect to the left and actually arrive at the right spot. So don't get this wrong, you will still hit the 9-ball with outside spin with a hard hit, in this case in the ghost ball point, but you are not aiming to the ghost ball because the cue ball won't arrive at your aiming point. Okay, I hope you got this. If you have any questions, just let me know in the comments. Now we're doing the same things, but this time we're going to use inside spin on the cue ball. This is in this case left spin. Remember what happened when we were using no spin on the cue ball? The cue ball came from that direction to the center of the ghost ball, and the cue ball actually pushed the 9-ball into this direction. This is why we actually caught that short rail. But what happens with the spin-induced throw when we're using left spin? The right spin actually threw the 9-ball to the left. This means more into this direction. The left spin actually throws the 9-ball to the right, so it also throws it to the short rail. This means we now have the cut and spin-induced throw, and both those forces throw the 9-ball to the short rail. So if you're just aiming to our center ghost ball point, we will actually miss way thick on this ball. Let me demonstrate real quick how this would look. Can you believe how thick we actually missed that ball? But this is the huge problem with inside spin, because you have the cut induced throw, you have the spin induced throw, and they aren't canceling each other out like with the outside spin, but they're supporting each other. This is why we're missing so thick. But the interesting thing is, if we're playing the same shot, same spin, but we're hitting a bit harder, the 9-ball will actually go a bit closer to the pocket. If we're still hitting harder, the 9-ball will get closer and closer and closer to the pocket until you're able to make it. If you're then hitting even harder, the 9-ball will actually go to the short rail. And this is just because of deflection, spin induced throw, and cut induced throw. Remember, the harder you hit, the more the cue ball will deflect, and the less the force of the cut or spin induced throw will be. So the interesting thing here is that there will actually be a sweet spot where you can still aim to the center of the ghost ball when using inside spin, when using outside spin, when using any spin on the cue ball. You just have to know the right speed for the sweet spot. So in this particular shot, it would be a bit more than medium speed. Well, everyone has its own medium speed, but let's just try to make it by aiming to the center of the ghost ball, and I'm just going to adjust my speed here. So again, center of the ghost ball, left spin. And you can see with this amount of speed, we were actually able to make the 9-ball into the heart of the pocket. If I'm playing the same shot now, let's do that real quick. With the same spin, aiming still to the center of the ghost ball, but I'm hitting really hard this time. Then we're actually going to misspin because, as you know, deflection will be dominant, pushes the cue ball to the right. Not a lot of spin or cut induced throw. So the trick with aiming with side spin is that you have to use the right speed if you want to aim to the center of the ghost ball, and if you want to use a different speed, then you have to adjust your aim. Alright, let's summarize the inside spin. Remember, we're hitting soft, we're coming from this direction. So even if you're hitting perfectly at the center of the ghost ball, the cut induced throw will throw the 9-ball to the right, and the spin induced throw, the left spin, will also throw the 9-ball to the right. So those two factors are actually supporting each other, and that's why it's so difficult to play this shot with inside spin. Remember, with the outside spin, we have the cut induced throw, we have the spin induced throw, and both cancel each other out. This is not the case here. So in case you want to shoot this ball soft with inside spin, you actually have to aim thinner on the 9-ball, because then the 9-ball is still thrown to the right, but it is thrown into the heart of the pocket. What happens if you're hitting really hard with inside spin? Remember, deflection will be dominant, so the cue ball will actually be pushed to this direction. So you will actually, if you're aiming to the center of the ghost ball, you will actually misspin, because there won't be a lot of cut induced throw and spin induced throw, just deflection. So if you're hitting this ball hard with inside spin, you actually have to aim thicker, just like that. So this is your ghost ball that you have to aim. You're actually trying to shoot it in the short rail, but the cue ball won't arrive at your ghost ball aiming point. It will actually be pushed to the right, and then just has the right contact point on the 9-ball. And remember, there will be a sweet spot in between with the right amount of speed where we can still aim to the center of the ghost ball. And I'm really sorry, there's one more thing we have to talk about, which is called swerve. So whenever you're playing shots with side spin, inside spin, or outside spin, you have to be as level as possible, because what happens if you have an elevated cue, the cue ball will actually make a curve. So I'm going to use left spin here, and I'm hitting hard, and usually, as you can see, the deflection pushes the cue ball to the right, and we will hit on the right side of our figure. But if we're playing the same shot, same amount of spin, same speed, but this time we're elevating our cue for whatever reason. Maybe there's a ball in the way and we have to elevate a tiny bit to play this type of shot. See what happens. Where will the cue ball hit? Remember, left spin, hitting hard. And you can see how the cue ball made a curve, and this is the problem. So here I'm going to play with right spin, and I'm playing soft, and as you can see, I have to elevate a lot. So what happens is the cue ball will actually make a curve to the right, and if you're aiming to the center of the ghost ball, we're probably going to miss the 11 ball completely. So what you actually have to do is you have to aim to miss the 11 ball to the left. You're aiming to that point, and then the cue ball makes a curve and should probably hit the 11 ball here. And as you can see, we're not going to hit the 11 ball at the ghost ball aiming point, because remember, we're having right spin on the cue ball, we're hitting soft. so the cue ball will actually throw the 11 ball to the left. So my chances are probably, I think, around 5% to actually make that ball, but I'm just going to show it to you nevertheless. So you can see this is why aiming systems, if you have to play those kind of shots, are really useless, to be honest, and this is just 100% feel. So I think I'm trying to shoot towards here. Of course, it depends a bit on the speed with the right spin. And we actually made that ball, first try by the way. So you can see why it's so difficult to aim if you're elevating your cue. So whenever you're playing shots with side spin, try to be as level as possible. Otherwise, you will have to calculate for the curve, and this will become really, really messy and really difficult to calculate. And this is, by the way, why I'm not a big fan of aiming systems. Yes, they can help, but as you can see, there are so many factors with speed, with the cutting angle, with how much you're elevating your cue, that this is really, really difficult to calculate. So I've learned to aim all those shots just by experience, doing it over and over again, and just knowing those facts that I was showing in this video will tremendously help you when you're experimenting on the table, when you're putting up, for example, disc shots, different shots. Just experiment with the side spin, have all the knowledge that you've learned in this video on your hand. Maybe rewatch this video if you want to, if you didn't get a certain point, and then you will definitely be able to aim shots and actually make shots with side spin very soon.